Sometimes you see people who don't exercise properly and just do partial reps. People hate these partial rep enthusiasts. This is because they appear to be performing exercises half-heartedly just to lift heavier weights, driven by their pride. But what would you say if doing partial reps actually builds more muscle? Would you believe me if I told you that doing only part of the movement when performing a dumbbell press, as shown, is actually superior for muscle hypertrophy than completing the full range of motion? I'll explain it step by step. Firstly, muscles grow most effectively when they are lengthened. Even with similar movements, extending the muscle more or emphasizing the lengthened portion greatly aids muscle hypertrophy. Let's look at a study that proves this. This study compared the overhead triceps extension with the neutral triceps pushdown. The triceps muscle length differs between these two exercises. If you look at the structure of the triceps, 2 of the 3 muscles only cross the elbow, but the long head of triceps crosses not only the elbow, but also the shoulder joint. When you lift your arm, the long head of the triceps stretches. The other muscle heads aren't affected by the shoulder, so their length doesn't change. With an overhead extension, the long head of the triceps is more stretched than with a pushdown. What did the study find? For 12 weeks, 2 groups did either overhead extensions or neutral pushdowns. The group that did extensions saw a much greater change in triceps muscle mass than the group that did pushdowns. There was a particularly significant change in the long head of the triceps, with the extension group experiencing a remarkable 1.5 times more muscle mass growth compared to the pushdown group. We can deduce that because the long head of triceps was lengthened, it displayed the most significant change in muscle mass, which also backs the claim that muscles grow more effectively when stretched. However, we can't make a definitive claim based on this one study alone. Even if a randomized controlled trial is meticulously carried out, it may still not perfectly reflect real-world scenarios, thus requiring further scientific backing to reach a definitive conclusion. It's also possible that the triceps are just a unique muscle. Perhaps only the triceps muscle grows well when stretched, and other muscles might not respond to stretching at all. So, I have another one for you. This time, it's a study comparing the seated hamstring curl and the lying hamstring curl. Similar to the triceps, the length of the hamstring also varies with body position. The hamstring consists of 3 muscles, and 2 of these extend across both the hip and knee joints. However, the third one bypasses the hip joint and only crosses the knee joint. Therefore, as you flex and extend your hip, only 2 muscles undergo a change in length, with the third remaining unaffected. When you perform a seated hamstring curl, your hips are rounded, causing 2 of the hamstring muscles to stretch even more. However, when you do a lying hamstring curl, your hips are fully extended, causing those 2 muscles to be comparatively shorter. The study spanned 12 weeks, and muscle mass changes were measured using MRI. Again, similarly, the group that performed the seated hamstring curl showed a greater change in muscle mass. But as expected, only the 2 muscles crossing the hip, which were more stretched, showed differences in muscle mass change. The muscle only crossing the knee, with no length change, showed the same muscle hypertrophy in both exercises. Can we conclude now? 2 studies might not suffice. However, as of January 2024, a total of 11 studies support the claim that muscles grow better when they are in a lengthened state. This raises a question about the range of motion. If you look at the range of motion by sections, the muscle length varies. Let's take the bicep curl as an example. When your elbow is bent, the bicep is short, but as the elbow extends, the bicep gradually lengthens. In the final part, with arm fully extended, the bicep is maximally stretched. If muscles grow better when they're stretched, do we really need to use the full range of motion? Wouldn't it be more beneficial to only perform the portion where the muscle is most lengthened? Yes, it is. Partial reps in the lengthened state are sufficient. Let's examine a key study proving this. A 2022 randomized controlled trial conducted by Dr. Pedrosa compared 3 different conditions when performing leg extensions. The first group performed the full range of motion, with the knee angle changing from 100 to 30 degrees. The second group performed only the initial part of the range of motion, with the knee angle changing from 100 to 65 degrees. The third group performed only the last part of the range of motion, and the knee angle changed from 65 to 30 degrees. Surprisingly, the largest muscle mass increase was seen in the group that trained the initial range of motion from 100 to 65 degrees. The initial phase of the movement, where the knee is relatively bent, is also the segment where the quadriceps are maximally elongated. Amazingly, approximately 10% more muscle hypertrophy was observed compared to the full range of motion, and this wasn't an isolated study. As of January 2024, there are 5 studies that compare the full range of motion versus partial range of motion in the lengthened muscle position. A whopping 4 of them found that partial range of motion in the stretched position induced about 10% more muscle hypertrophy. The remaining study reported that both methods had the same effect. It turns out the partial rep enthusiasts were right all along. It's repeatedly proven that performing reps only in the stretched muscle portion is more advantageous than full range of motion. How can we apply this? Should you start doing all your exercises with a partial range of motion right now? I don't think that's advisable. Variety is important in bodybuilding. Even if bench press is the most effective chest exercise, you need to vary movements like pec deck fly and chest press to maximize muscle hypertrophy. It has also been repeatedly proven that when it comes to weight or repetitions, it's more beneficial to use a variety of weights and reps between 5 and 30 rather than sticking exclusively to either very heavy or very light weights. Of course, partial range of motion in the stretch position has a greater effect on muscle hypertrophy than full range of motion, but I don't think it's wise to perform all exercises that way. Don't we all have a chest exercise that gives the best stimulation, but you likely won't do only that exercise daily? It's best to include supplementary exercises in your routine. Let me say it again, variety is important. The same goes for the range of motion. While the lengthened partial range of motion is about 10% more effective for muscle hypertrophy, to give your muscles varied stimuli and allow your joints to exert force from diverse angles, it's best to combine both full and lengthened partial ranges of motion. So, how do you incorporate this into your routine? I will explain that to you now. First, go to failure with full range of motion. Then, add extra reps with a stretched partial range of motion to go beyond that failure point, achieving a high-intensity workout. Let's use the lat pull-down as an example. Right now, the client does 1, 2, 3, 4 reps and keeps going, hitting the failure point at 12 reps. Now, for the 13th rep, he can't use a full range of motion. No matter how hard he pulls the bar down, it only goes as far as his forehead. Instead of stopping the set at this failure point, he continues with a partial range of motion. The bar that was going down to your forehead will eventually move only slightly above your head toward the crown. When you extend your arms overhead, your lats are at their maximum stretch. So, doing partial reps at the top of an exercise means you're repeatedly working the muscle only in its most stretched range. Ultimately, by performing 12 reps with a full range of motion and then an additional 5 reps with a partial range of motion, you've pushed beyond the failure point for a very high-intensity workout. Especially since the last 5 reps were done with the muscle in a stretched state, it provides a stronger stimulus for muscle hypertrophy. The second method is to perform the set with a lengthened partial range of motion from the very beginning without using the full range of motion at all. However, I recommend only applying this method to some of your sets, not necessarily all of them. If you're doing 5 sets of lat pull-downs, you would only use a partial range of motion for the last 2 sets. It's a good idea to decide beforehand how far you'll pull the bar. You should set a specific standard, such as pulling to eye level, your forehead, or the top of your head, and ensure every repetition reaches that exact mark. If each repetition is executed with a varying range of motion, it becomes challenging to ascertain whether progressive overload is actually occurring. When you pull to your forehead sometimes and to the top of your head other times, the difficulty of repetitions within a set becomes inconsistent, making it very hard to assess if your strength is truly increasing. This method is most suitable for exercises where the top part of the movement becomes significantly easier. For example, the dumbbell chest fly. When doing a fly, when is it hardest and when is it easiest? At the bottom of the movement, when your arms are fully stretched, the resistance is strongest. But at the top, where your arms come together, the resistance from gravity comes straight down your arms, so there's almost no actual resistance on the pecs. It makes you wonder, should I even bother with the part that has no resistance? Using a lengthened partial range of motion in such exercises means you only do the resisted bottom portion and skip the non-resisted top. So, by eliminating the muscle's resting phase, you repeatedly do only the hard part. For reference, lengthened partial range of motion is not suitable for heavy barbell exercises like squats or bench presses. Because you're only performing the hardest last part, you could hit a failure point and get crushed by the barbell, so I suggest using it for safer machine exercises. Among my clients, there are those who do absurd things like this, claiming they're doing partial range of motion training. What went wrong here? Just doing partial reps isn't always good. When you do a squat by only going down halfway, that's not a lengthened range of motion, but a shortened one. In other words, it's a movement that emphasizes the shortened state of the muscle, not the lengthened state. Let's think about when the muscle is most stretched. When you squat deep, the quadriceps and glutes are stretched the most. A squat with a shallow depth uses the shortened part of the muscle's range, and this shortened partial range of motion is inferior to the lengthened range and even to the full range of motion. It can be confusing. In the lat pull-down, the top part of the movement was the lengthened range of motion, so why is the bottom part of the squat the lengthened range? You have to think about the muscle's length. For the lat pull-down, the lats are stretched when you fully extend your arms. Conversely, when you squat deep, your glutes and quadriceps are stretched. Let's look at bicep curls. The extended elbow portion is the lengthened range of motion, and the bent elbow portion is the shortened range of motion. There are 8 studies that compare the shortened partial range of motion with the lengthened partial range of motion. Out of those, a whopping 7 studies reported that the lengthened partial range of motion is more favorable for muscle hypertrophy, and only 1 study found no significant difference between the two. So, if you're doing partial range of motion exercises, do them right and emphasize the fully lengthened muscle part. Of course, we need to consider additional research results as they emerge, but based on the current evidence, it's almost certain that performing a lengthened partial range of motion is more advantageous than a full range of motion. I'm already applying lengthened partial range of motion to my personal workouts and the routines of the clients I coach. Progressive Overload is a dedicated team made up of 3 expert trainers. In this age of information overload, we are doing our best to deliver only the core knowledge.